Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for night two of the 215 Festival. Um, Welcome. My name is Jarrett Michael Lowe, and I am one of the programming coordinators for this year's festival. If you like tonight's event, you can keep up with festival events all year long by signing up for our newsletter at 215festival.org. This event has live transcription, closed captioning available. Click the CC button at the bottom of your screen to turn on or off the closed captioning. Please also note that this event is being recorded. I am so excited for tonight's conversation. I'm so excited for tonight's panelists, and I'm so excited for tonight's moderator to lead the discussion. Ashley M. Coleman is a dear friend of mine. I've known her for a while, and I'm just so proud of her, as well as all of our panelists mentioned here. So I am very excited to see what this conversation builds and everything. So with that said, I'm just going to read Ashley's bio here. Ashley M. Coleman is a storyteller and community builder, moonlighting as a writer and director of member outreach at the Recording Academy. Whether she is working with music makers or writers from marginalized communities, creating safe gathering spaces and education for creatives at the center of her world. Her freelance writing has been featured in ZORA Magazine, Grammy.com, and The Cut, among others, and she covers culture, lifestyle, and personal narrative. Currently, she is working on her forthcoming novel with 37 Ink Books, Good Morning Love. You can catch her co-hosting the EightyTwo NinetySix podcast with Gabrielle Hickmon, tweeting often, indulging in hip hop and R&B music, and laughing at her pit boxer mix Coltrane. I'm a fan of Coltrane. I think a lot of people who follow Ashley on social are huge fans of Coltrane, so maybe she'll talk more about Coltrane tonight. And with that, I will hand it off to Ashley to start tonight's program.
Thanks so much, Jarrett. I actually just had to kick Coltrane out of the room because he is the biggest distraction sometimes when you're actually trying to do professional things. So thank you so much, Jarrett. Thank you to 215 Festival for creating this space for us to have this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it as well. This is a part of Permission to Write, which is my writing community that's online and in person for Black writers and writers of color. And so shout out to Jarrett, who is a part of our awesome writing group here in Philly, where I would not have a book with 37 inks if it wasn't for them helping me work through chapters and query letters and all types of good things like that. So thank you so much, Jarrett, for that intro. And without further ado, I want to get into our guest for today and talk a little bit about them. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about them. Please excuse me if I'm looking down. I want to make sure to pull some key points from their bios, although I'm just going to hype them up like only Black girls can do. So I want to first introduce Jeannine A. Cook, who is the awesome owner and curator of Harriett's Bookshop, which is just such a staple in the community in Fishtown. I have been there often and order a lot of stuff from Bookshop through their online service. Jeannine has a degree from the university, holds a master's degree from the University of the Arts. She was also a Leeway Art and Transformation grantee and winner of the South Philly Review Difference Maker Award. Her work has been in numerous places that include the New York Times, CNN, Ebony, BET. I mean, everywhere has really highlighted her. And I have to really plug that right now she has a GoFundMe to solidify her space and make a permanent space. So I do just want to highlight that and encourage you to support her. So we just want to welcome Jeannine, who's an also a writer in addition to owning her own bookshop. So we want to welcome her and welcome this evening, Jeannine. It's so good to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you. So next up, I have L'Oreal Thompson Payton, who, yes, she always says, yes, L'Oreal, like the makeup, right? Is the easiest way to know. L'Oreal is Baltimore bred, but Chicago based, and she's a freelance writer, editor, and sometimes blogger dedicated to centering and celebrating Black girl magic in all she does. Her work has been featured everywhere from Bustle to Ebony, Hello Giggles, Jet, and Self, Shondaland, ZORA. She's a highly sought after public speaker and shares about vital personal and professional advice. She has also done a master class for us at Permission to Write. So she's an amazing teacher. And when she's not being found reading, dancing, or doing yoga, she's writing, right? And so you can also find more about her at ltinthecity.com, and of course follow her Twitter and Instagram at ltinthecity. So welcome tonight, L'Oreal.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks for hyping me up, and thank you for having me tonight. I'm really excited to be here.
You know what I love about us? We're like, come on, Bookshop, come on, freelance writer. Like I love that about how we hype each other up. And then last but certainly not least, tonight we have Tiffany D. Jackson, who is also an integral part in why I even have a book anywhere. So shout out to that, but we'll get into community and how important that is. She's a New York Times bestselling author of YA novels. Like, yes, when I saw that for Grown, I was like, come on, somebody. This includes that she's won the Coretta Scott King John Steptoe New Talent Award for Monday's Not Coming, the NAACP Image Award nominated, allegedly. Her other book, Let Me Hear a Rhyme, and then Grown, which we mentioned is the New York Times bestseller. And she also has forthcoming 2021 titles, Blackout, White Smoke, and Santa in the City. When I tell you she's lit, she had a book schedule of all the books that are coming out this year, right? She received her Bachelor of Arts in Film from Howard University, her Master of Arts in Media Studies from the New School, and has over a decade of TV and film experience, which we definitely see in her reels on social media. And she's a lover of naps, cookie dough, beaches, and currently residing in the borough she loves, most likely multitasking. So welcome tonight, Tiffany.
Thank you so much for having me. Like, I mean, I don't know if anyone, well, you all probably see this, but we look beautiful.
Yes.
Like all four of us, I'm like, yes, somebody screen grab. Yes, thank you. Okay, but yes, thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. And I love it because I feel like, I know Tiffany and I know L'Oreal, and I feel connected to Jeannine, even though like we don't talk all the time, but I feel like she's my girl in my head. She's definitely my bookshop in Philly here, of course, along with Uncle Bobby's and many others. But yeah, tonight we get to talk about this idea of building community and collective power, right? And so this is a major onus behind like the work that I do. What I noticed very quickly is that writing is a solitary sport, right? We hear it all the time. We heard Miss McKinney Whetstone talk about it yesterday if you attended that. Just the importance of like, oh my God, we're sitting here in front of a laptop by ourselves, trying to hammer out these words. And the minute you hear someone like last night, Miss McKinney Whetstone was talking about how hard revision is. As I like just turned in like the third round of revisions on my book, and I just was like, yes, it is hard. So it's so nice to feel seen in those moments. So I wanted to ask all of you, what are really your earliest memories of this idea of community when it comes to your writing? And anyone can take that, just jump in.
I'll jump in and say, like, one of the reasons why, if you follow in my social media handles, it started off as Write and BK, WRITINBK. And that literally was because I wanted a writer collective. And it started around the 2008 recession. And basically I put up a sign and said, hey, does anyone want to write together, or like just talk about the idea of writing and the craft of writing? And we met in a bookshop that unfortunately closed eventually in Bed-Stuy. But you know, we had writers coming from everywhere, even from Philly. And we really sat down and we just talked about the ideas of writing. We talked about the struggles we all had, because this is something that we're all very passionate about. But it's an upward climb, right? It's either like you're trying to get noticed, you're trying to get an agent, you're trying to have your book, actually trying to finish your book, period. Like that also is something. But the best part about having a community that you're sort of starting out with is you're sort of engaging with each other and like hyping each other up. And that's like kind of one of the best parts about being in a community, because you need that. When you're home alone, you know, you only have like the thoughts in your head to keep you company. But when you know, collectively come into like a little, like, you know, a little circle and say like, you know, how did you do with your pages this week and stuff like that, and just kind of like keeping accountability with each other. I think that really helps. That puts like the fire under you a little bit. So to me, I think community is incredibly important, especially in this type of industry that is works to put us against each other a lot of times. So yeah.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts, ladies?
I second that. I feel like the earliest memories probably on social media, when I joined Twitter in 2010. You know, I'm from a small town in Maryland, so Baltimore's kind of a lot. I'm from Belcamp. No one knows where that is. So I claim Baltimore because it's the nearest biggest city. And, you know, I'm an awkward Black girl from the suburbs. Like and I went to all girl Catholic high school. I was one of 2 Black girls there, even though I was editor-in-chief of my student newspaper and the literary magazine. There wasn't that community. And I don't think until I joined Twitter, because that's where all the writers hang out, it seems like, and I met other awkward Black girls who lived in places all over the country, all over the world, and we kind of united. Or I'm pretty sure that's how I met Ashley, in quotation marks, because we've never met in real life. And then once I joined her community, Permission to Write, that was the first real community I feel like I felt, where there are other people doing the same thing and we're working together, we're hyping each other up, we're also pushing each other, and the accountability. I mean, without the power hours that you have every Friday, I would not have finished my most recent updated, like 5th revision on my book proposal. And now I'm out for a submission, and I had a call with the publisher this morning. Like, that is because of you and Permission to Write. I would not have been able to do it, because I mean, I have the day job and I'm doing editing, I'm freelance writing, I have my newsletter. Well, thank you, A. Richards. You have all this other writing that you do that's for other people. So having that weekly time carved out to write my stuff, to focus on the book, was fundamental. So yeah, I will definitely be, I'm a part of it now, will be part of it moving forward. And shout out to Permission to Write and acknowledgements, because it literally would not have happened without that. Accountability is really, even though it's just showing up and we're still in our own spaces, like in our own homes. I know every Friday at 11 Central that Ashley's going to be online, and I'm going to join her, and I'm going to write for an hour and feel that sense of sisterhood and community with other Black women writers in particular, because there's something special about what we do and who we are. And so that alone just gives me so much life and energy.
I love that, and congrats on, you know, just being on submission. It is a whole journey. So I'm so glad that you're there, for sure.
Nerve-wracking, yes.
And Twitter is certainly a place where the writers hang, right? So it's a great kind of starting point for community and trying to find your tribe. Any thoughts for you, Jeannine, on kind of like those early, like your earliest kind of interaction with building community around writing and literature?
Yeah, I mean, so it's so many little things. Like now when I look back, right? Like I remember cousins coming to the house for the summer and me being like, okay, everyone, like here's a notebook, like we're gonna, you know, this is how we're gonna do school, and you know, you're gonna one at a time get up and tell us your poem. You know, like that was a part of like how we did cousins, right? And that was community building, and I didn't really know that that's what that was. I know when I got to Philly, I was about 17. We started something called Positive Minds, and the whole idea was like, let's go out into the community, let's go onto a city block, let's teach storytelling, let's just like connect, right? Like let's teach families we had this whole project called Where Everyone Knows Your Name, where we wanted everyone on a block to be able to identify one another by name. And so, yeah, like that's just a part of who I am, I think. And that's why a bookshop, right? Because like, where else can you have that kind of connection? Where else can you have those kind of deep dialogues besides somewhere like this, at least for me, that this is a place that works for me. But yeah, so I think way back, I think probably I can remember, bossing everyone, telling everyone, sit down, let's do it, let's write. And still now, like when my son's friends come over, I had everybody doing poetry in a circle. And so, yeah, that's just a part of it.
I love it. And I love this return to the bookshop as a central place for a physical community, because I feel like it got really bleak there for a while when like Barnes and Noble and Borders were like these huge conglomerates, but I feel like we're almost like coming back to the independent bookstore, which is just a beautiful space.
It ebbs and flows. It ebbs and flows, right? And I'm not exactly sure why it ebbs and flows. It's not the funnest thing to think about. Like, what about when it goes? But right. For now, I think that it's definitely a civic space. I think it's definitely a community space.
For sure.
And I think as like authors and writers, we look at like independent bookshops as like king. Like we look at like independent bookshops and libraries as the people who are really championing our books. When we look at like larger corporations, regardless of how great maybe those booksellers are from Barnes and Nobles, or even Amazon for that matter, because I have talked to them, there's still not that quality of care that's with bookshops. And so that's one of the things that I love about kind of, going into my own local bookshops and talking to them and saying like, I'm a writer, they'll be able to big up my books or being able to just, kind of support me or support my friends. Even so there's an agent, Eric Smith, who literally goes to Harriett Bookshop like almost every Saturday. And he takes pictures
every single week.
And he sends them to all the authors. So I literally get a picture from him almost every week of some of my books. Right. And so we're talking, and I'm always like, I just want the pandemic to be actually kind of over so I can like roll through.
Pop through, right.
But he literally, and he knows a heap of authors and he knows them everywhere. So right then and there, it's like that community building of he's spreading the word about this bookstore and we all know it personally from this personal touch. And that's something that is a part of about being in a part of a community is the same way I talk about like Greenlight Bookstore in Brooklyn. Like that's one of my local bookstores. Or even like a Mahogany Bookstore in DC. Like I'm always bigging up those bookstores because I know that these are my people.
And that
it's really special what Eric has done, because not only is he like introducing us to the authors and then the authors to us, but then like the other day he came in and a woman was literally buying his book and talking to me about, because he's also a writer, right? And she's talking to me about how special he is. And I'm telling her like, yeah, because he comes in every week and then he walks in and she's like, she has a total fangirl moment. And then he like signs her stuff. Right. And so I was just like, see, this is the magic right here. This is the magic.
Yes.
He's a real one.
Yeah.
And that really speaks to this idea of collective power, right? And how, he's really a connector, right? Because I think he's probably touched everyone on this on this Zoom in one way or another, right? Like Eric, you will be in my acknowledgments.
Yes.
But how do you feel like you've seen collective power work in other ways in publishing and literature? I know one thing that kind of was top of mind for me was when I forgot the exact hashtag, but people were talking about what they made for an advance. And that was kind of going around Twitter.
Publishing paid me, I think.
I know it might have been stressful for some, but it was stressful for all of us, I think, specifically as POCs and probably realizing we're being paid significantly less, right, than our counterparts. But I felt like, that was an important moment because there was transparency, right? Because that's how collective power works. When we know what we should be asking for, we have more bargaining tools. So what are some other ways that you've kind of seen collective power work in our industry of writing and publishing and literature?
Well, one for at least for children's literature, the hashtag We Need Diverse Books definitely pushed a huge movement, brought attention to the fact that, there's literally like 3% of all books published that have Black characters in it are actually written by Black people. So it really sort of like put a spotlight on, and giving statistical data. And I think that's really important to be able to kind of move through those spaces and not saying like, and not that our opinions don't matter or, what we're saying doesn't matter, but I think it's important to also bring like facts and figures so that people can really read the math and be like, this is wrong. So that was one huge thing that came around. When was that? I want to say like 2014, 15. And still to this day. And, because of that collective movement, there's a whole organization. They go into publishing houses. They give presentations on how to, improve their practices. And is definitely increasing the amount of sensitivity reads, going into schools and putting into programmings and making sure. And as a person who goes into schools and give lectures about why it is important to have a diverse like bookshelf, I think that all was off of the power of even a hashtag on Twitter. So I think that is important that we, recognize the fact that even though like it sounds like just like we mentioned the whole like publishing paid me hashtag. And at first we thought that was going to blow up in our face, but that actually turned around and a lot of people, were able to go back and renegotiate their contracts. Being able to like kind of go and be like, so you paid this girl this and you didn't pay me this. I couldn't even stand to look at it. I was like, I can't. It was so traumatizing to look and see like how much like Jessamine Ward was paid for Salvage the Bones. It was one of my favorite books of all time. I was like, I can't even look at this phone anymore. I don't want to know. I just don't want to know. So I think there is some power in bringing transparency to the forefront.
Absolutely. Any other
Yeah,
thoughts?
I was gonna say for us, just as an example, so we get these crazy, nasty, terroristic threats, right? Somebody's like, we're gonna do this to you and we're gonna do that to you, like the worst things that people could say to another person. And I think that the collective power in response to that, right, was pretty amazing. It was, first of all, it was fast, right? Fruit of Islam was down here, like, what? Somebody said something to somebody down here, and besides, like, the stigmas was down. It was like, what? Who said what? Right? And so that was one part. But then the youth conductors who work here do a TikTok video. A TikTok, which I was just like, I'm not with the TikTok. Get that out of here. I'm all like acting like a old auntie or whatever. And they were like, no, we're doing it. This TikTok goes viral. Collective power. Collective power. It goes all the way to Isabel Wilkerson. And then Isabel Wilkerson's like, yeah, I'm gonna come down there, right? Because you guys are giving away these books and and we'll stand together in the face of this. And like that kind of like, who, like that kind of, momentum is just super powerful over and over and over again. The GoFundMe, another example, right? Like in a week's time, raising $100,000, right, to buy our own space, to own our own space. Like that's collective power. And it's economic and it's self-determination. It's all, it's a lot. It's kuji chocolate. It's all of those things all wrapped in together.
I love that. And I think it's such a testament to your spirit as well, because it's like, you're for the people, right? And I just think of like, Judas and the Black Messiah. And after watching that, like all that's in my head is like, it's with the people. Like, like I am all about it. Like, yes, there's so much power when we come together. But L'Oreal, you had a thought on that as well.
Yeah, especially in freelancing. I mean, I think similar to publishing paid me, people sharing transparently. I think of the panels like last year of freelancing with Tim Herrera at the New York Times, Woodan, and I forget the other woman's name. I feel terrible, but the Freelance Co-op podcast, and just sharing rates, even just the transparency around that, because I think particularly as Black women and women of color, we are so undermined, undervalued, underpaid. And when you see what this cisgender white guy over here is making, I remember actually as one of my kind of, not protege, who do you call, like the apprentice, I guess, whatever, when I was in college, he was like studying me when I was about to graduate and leave the copy editor role, had made like 100,000 in freelancing. And I was like, dude is younger than me and he is qualified, don't get me wrong, like great writer, but still I was like, you made how much doing what now? And that lit a fire under me to raise my rates and have the confidence around that as well, but you don't know what you don't know. And so found so much community and that collective power in sharing about race online. Just having that transparency around money is so taboo. People are like, oh, don't talk about it. Even salary when you get into full-time roles and other things like that. And I'm always one to share, okay, this is what I'm making, so that people have that information. As information is power. And when you know what the market rate is for something, then you're like, okay, well, I can charge that and not feel ridiculous or look silly doing that. All about sharing openly, like the threads where people talk about, I made this much, this outlet pays this much per word, or this project was that much. Because it's so easy too. I think people go online like, oh, I made 6 figures freelancing, and not mention that, okay, well, maybe some of that is like corporate writing or something, like the less sexy side of writing. So that transparency is really, really valuable.
It's so needed. Oh my goodness. Because I was so glad to have someone to call. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I had met Tiffany a few years back. Like, we just have the funniest story of like how our worlds intersected, with her like working with my husband, and then like us also meeting at one of my workshops. It was so odd. And so yeah, having that person to call to just be like, all right, look, girl, you one of the people I know that's doing it. what do I ask? Where should I be? Because you don't know until you know, to your point. I feel like Tiffany kind of like brushed upon this earlier, but like, how do you really manage competition versus community, right? So she kind of talked about like, sometimes we're in an industry where you're pitted against each other. Say like in YA, there's so many young, hot authors, that there can kind of be that competition. But how have you all managed to really navigate that feeling of wanting to come together with folks versus competing with other people in your field?
Well, I guess the biggest thing that I had to learn, this is now I'm like, what, 4 books in, I don't even know anymore. But I think one of the biggest things I had to learn is to sort of turn inwardly and know that you're dope. Like, that's the biggest thing that you need to do first of all. Like, because one of the things that will happen is you when you start writing, you start getting readers and like, fans or whatnot. They start comparing you to other people, and it's not about comparison. It's about, what can you bring to the table at the end of the day, like, how organically or how can you bring your most authentic self to the table. And I think that's one of the things that I stopped trying to be like this certain author or that certain author, and I decided to just be myself. And I think that's one of the things that's really helped me not look at other people as my competition, but as my coworkers, as my co-working friends. So that was one of the biggest things. And two, like, I think also for me, coming from a school that going to Howard University and we all kind of being on the same page in terms of, one of the best things about going to a historical Black college is we learn to kind of just work together. Like, we're all trying to rise. So we don't have that kind of mentality. So I didn't come into spaces sort of on the defensive. I just assume that we all are trying to rise. So that's one of the other things that's sort of like looking at Black communities or looking at communities of color and saying like, hey, that we're up against a lot. So let's help each other at this point. So I think kind of going inward and saying like, what do you value? Like, what are you trying to bring to the table? How are you trying to be different for your own self? Like, who is your audience? Is your audience like, your critics? Is your audience Goodreads? Is your audience in the comment sections of your articles? Or is your audience the people that you are truly trying to engage with?
I love it. I love that.
It's funny too, because when you mentioned knowing that you're dope is, and Ashley knows this because every week again when I show up to Power Hour, like the working title, I know it's subject to change once we sign a deal, but the working title of my book is Trust Your Dopeness, and is about overcoming self-doubt, imposter syndrome. And the irony is feeling very severe imposter syndrome and writing a book about imposter syndrome, or even being on this panel with a New York Times bestselling author. I'm like, oh my gosh, Ashley, you set me up. But how I overcome that, and it's a daily thing, right? It's not something you do once and then it's like, okay, I'm done and I'm never gonna feel like an outsider or imposter ever again. But those moments in choosing to trust your dopeness, know that you are talented, you're gifted, what you have to say matters. And even if we're all saying the same thing, we're saying it to different people. Like someone needs to hear what you specifically have to say because you have followers that maybe I don't, or like vice versa, and etc. And then just calling it out. Like I'm very big on naming emotions now, thanks to therapy, because the Scorpio and Enneagram 3 in me is very much like, no, feelings, what are those? But I remember one of my influencer friends, Aisha Bo on Instagram, another person never met in real life, but I consider her one of my social media friends, and she had me on our podcast and we were talking openly about jealousy, because that is a real feeling, like that does exist. And it was so funny because I told her, like, well, I'm jealous of you. Like you have all these followers getting these deals. And like, I'm jealous of you. You're writing for ZORA. And we just laughed about it and then sung Beyonce because that's what one does, in reference to jealousy from the Lion King soundtrack, of course. But naming it, talking openly about it, laughing about it, because it's like, we're both doing dope things. We're in our own lanes. Like she is an influencer, I'm a writer. Like we each have something valuable to offer. And so it's about how can we work together and collaborate, build that sense of community rather than competition. But I think to not acknowledge or like, show that vulnerability of, okay, you know, sometimes I do, like on Tuesdays, I would avoid Twitter because everyone's announcing their book deals. And I'm just like, okay, you know, like it really, especially people on multiple book deals. So they're on their second, third, and you're like, I'm just over here trying to get an agent at the time, you know, like those feelings are real and valid. So acknowledging them, naming them and making peace with them, I think is also part of the process.
Because it will keep going, L'Oreal, because once you get the book deal, now I'm mad sometimes when people's books are out because I'm like still revising mine and I'm just like, man, their book is out. It will keep going. So you are right. You just got to work through it, you know, at each different stage and journey for sure. And then Jeannine, I feel like, you know, in my mind, there's like Harriet's and Uncle Bobby's, right, in Philly, and I feel like you both support one another. You know, so how does that really show up for you? This idea of kind of like overcoming competition for community.
Yeah, when we were opening, like, and you'll see me say it on all of. I'm like, we're bookstore cousins, right? Like that's all there is. And you think about your cousins, y'all all fly, y'all all got your own style, you all got your own presence. But like to be, you know, upset about your cousin doing well, no, never, right? And that's all we want is for each other to do well. And I love Mark, right? Like Marcus, he sends me stuff. He's like, you know, he puts me down on some information. I love it. I'm like, thank you so much, because I do see myself as like a younger sister or a younger cousin kind of thing in the game, and I'm glad that somebody cares to give me any advice or any, you know, any ideas, any like critique, like all of that. I you know, send it my way, right? Like that's very, very, very helpful for us. And I think that the other thing is like, you know, when you're on a mission, when you're on purpose, like how can anyone compete over purpose? You know what I mean? Your purpose is your purpose. The voices that come to you, the intuition, like the intuitive like drive, like how could you compete with that? It's the voices are yours. And I think that the only part where it gets, you know, convoluted is when we're not listening to those internal voices that's telling us what we are supposed to be doing.
I knew y'all was gonna make me want to run around the church. I knew it. I knew it. And one of the things for me, I always try to remember that scarcity is the biggest lie they ever told us, and that there's enough for everybody. You know, like there's enough.
The
for
colonialist
everybody.
mindset. The colonialist mindset. Try to have us thinking we got to compete. Like that's weird. Does the sun compete with the moon? You know what I mean? Like no.
Ooh,
absolutely.
I felt that. I mean, I will say one of the biggest things that I've learned in the whole imposter syndrome, or just feeling that kind of like scarcity or jealousy or anything like that, the biggest thing that I learned how to balance that and to just kind of ignore it, for lack of a better word, is to make sure that you have a balance in your life. So making sure you have a balance of friends. So I have a lot of friends who are not in my industry at all. And they really help me in terms of like making sure that I still kind of like keep humble and be able to like do what I want to do. I get to still travel. I get to still like hang out and party and stuff like, well, when it wasn't, you know, a panini. But like before, I was still out and about in these streets, and I think that that was really important to me because I needed to be able to have that balance. I need to be able to talk about, like, you know, stupid like rappers, and like, you know, or I need to be able to just listen to ratchet music and be okay with that. Because there are times where something will like ridiculous happen in your career, and then when you say it to a friend, like, oh my God, this girl got a bookmark and I didn't, and that friend will look at you crazy, and you're like, you're right, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like that immediately, like that like literally like brings me right back. So whenever I have like chats with debuts or inspiring writers, I always say, like, you know, make sure you have a life outside of whatever your job is, because even though this is our passion, this is our career, this is who we are, we still need to be able to balance that. So one of the ways I even met Ashley, before I realized that she was married to someone I was working with, Ashley had put together this like yoga journaling workshop, and I went there with another friend, and it was literally like restorative yoga. It was the first time I ever took restorative yoga, and it literally like I was so nervous because I was like, everyone's sitting still, I'm like, why aren't we moving, like why aren't we like, but it was one of the first times I was able to really like relax and be calm and journal, and it not be about like I'm not writing something, like it's not for work, I'm literally journaling for myself. So like I tried to keep up with that practice in terms of journaling, because I hadn't done it in a while after that. But just right then and there, it's just like bringing that sort of like melding two worlds together, where it's restorative yoga, where you're bringing back, you know, the power of self-care. I think it's incredibly important. So yeah, having friends and having a life is self-care.
And I think we figured that out because after that workshop, I was like, there was a real writer in my workshop. Like, she's like a real writer. Like, she has a book. So I think that's how we figured it out. But I love that idea of just like having other things, you know, like sometimes we can get, I think specifically sometimes our generation, we're so career oriented that we get lost on like, what do I like to do for fun? You know what I mean? Like, what do I like to do that's different? So real quickly, I want to encourage you all to use the Q&A feature on the Zoom webinar. If you have questions, I have 2 more questions that I want to ask the ladies, and then I will definitely hop into the Q&A box. But please utilize that feature if you have questions for us to get to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So really quickly, I want to ask, I have to ask about, Tiffany, you working with 5 other authors, I think, to work on Blackout, which is your forthcoming YA novel. It's literally y'all like the YA Avengers came together to work on a book. And so I wanted to really ask you this question about like community is one thing, but collaborating is another. So if you want to talk a little bit about that experience.
It actually was, I call us like Power Rangers. I picked the color white. You know, that's just for me. But this was actually Donnell Clayton's idea to kind of put together this book, because there was, we realized that we've seen a lot of co-written books or anthologies that had interconnected stories, and Blackout is about literally 6 interconnected love stories that take place during a New York City blackout. And one of the things that we wanted to do specifically is we realized that we don't have enough like Black love stories, like with Black kids. And we all felt like we needed that. We didn't see that until we were pretty much adults. We always, whenever we did read like love, romance, YA novels or anything like that, it was always the Black sassy friend, the sidekick, but never the actual person, that the object of desire. So we all, sort of mentioned that, and we decided to get together and write this book. And it was actually pretty easy, considering we're all, pretty good friends. Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, and we all came out during the same year. So we debuted the same year together. So we already had that connection. Donnell came out a year prior, and she was, head of We Need Diverse Books. So we had that connection. Ashley worked in marketing, knew that kind of stuff. And then we had Queen Nicola Yoon, who was one of the first people to kind of make a Black girl very much an object of desire. So it was very easy for us to all work together, and knowing that we are putting our sort of, how we put it, I guess we kind of put our pride aside. And then I don't know if it's really pride, but kind of like put our egos aside, because we all had the same goal, is that we wanted to show Black kids being in love. And so when you have the same goal, the same mission, it's easy to kind of like, everyone divide and conquer, which is great. It's great to kind of have that community. It's great to know that we have such a different fan base, and we can all bring it together. And it's awesome because we're all professionals. And that's one of the other bigger thing about working with like in a community is knowing that you all have similar goals and knowing that you all want this outcome for like a sole purpose of, for children, particularly for us. And I would love to do this in like, of course, an adult space at some point in time, like, just have like, a girl band group. So yeah, I would love to kind of like do that again. But I think it can take a lot, especially since we're all in different cities, we're on Zooms or we're just in like, our chat kind of like talking. But I do think that it's incredibly possible. And I think, things work better in numbers. So I feel like if you do have like, other Black women that you want to collaborate with, like, and kind of like throw out ideas, like maybe we should do this, or, maybe we should put on our own book festival, or maybe we should put this on. Like, I think there's so many possibilities, especially when you have sort of a similar goal. Absolutely. I hope I answered the question.
No, absolutely, okay. You did. That's so good. And I'm a big YA reader. I think I literally feel like because we didn't have a lot of like super representative YA books when I was growing up, that like I love reading YA as an adult. So I will definitely be reading the love stories. I felt similarly actually why my book is like a women's fiction romance is I felt similarly. I just felt like I call it like the insecure books. Like I just want to write about Black people being regular, falling in love,
or like the awkward Black girls who like we still have problems dating. Hi, like I feel like we need more of those. Like I still to this day haven't seen myself in a Black romance story. I've seen a lot of like sexy girls, and I've seen a lot of different things, but I've never seen my awkward my awkward self who's not exactly in shape and who likes nerdy things. I have not seen that as the the 30-something-year-old love story being put on the page. So yeah, I love it. That's why I was really championing your book as well too.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the last question, and then I'm gonna jump into this Q&A box. I just want to know, what do you all feel like you can kind of tell aspiring writers about how to go about building community? I feel like we've touched upon certain things, but if there be any other kind of notes or just gems to how to go about it, 'cause I see it all the time, and like a lot of times I'm on Twitter like, permission to write, like trying to tell people, because I feel like people are always looking for connection, but sometimes you can't force it, right? Like, so, a group has to meld. I think it's actually really cute that the PTW Power Hour, like everyone really like gels, because we were all strangers, getting together on a Zoom and an awkward, panini, as Tiffany called it, like just trying to get work done, So, I don't know if you have any thoughts to how people can really go about building community in the way that you all have. Any thoughts or tips on that?
I mean, I'm still trying to figure out how to get into the group chat. When I interviewed Nick Stone last year for Shondaland about her last book, and she told me about Blackout, it was coming up, but it hadn't been announced yet. And the names, and I was just like, how do I get in? Because it's just like, you said the Avengers of Black writers in YA, and I know it's authentic, and the debuts all came out at the same time, and that kind of authentic friendship, and so that's what I aspire to and looking to. I feel like even Ashley, like you are, my friend Jeannine Jackson needs to be an essence in her book Boss Bride, and that mentions finding your rabbit. And what she meant by that is essentially the person who's a few steps ahead of you and doing what it is that you want to do and learning from them, asking them questions. So I have found that in Permission to Write, Ashley, with what you're doing as well. And just being yourself, because I feel like if you try to force it and like make fetch happen, that's not cute, like that can backfire, and those aren't your people. So it may take a while. I mean, it wasn't until, was that last year that I maybe really started getting involved in Permission to Write. But so being patient and being your authentic self, because yeah, you have to show up as you, not someone that you think you're supposed to be or that like the world wants from you. And yeah, when you find new people, you'll know, it'll feel like home. And yeah, so don't force it, don't stress it, and it'll come to you. You get what you put out, I feel like. So
Awesome. I love that, L'Oreal. How about for you, Jeannine?
Yeah, I agree. When I first started the bookshop, I really thought it was going to be like this really solitary place where, this is my writing studio and this is how I wanted to look and feel. And I didn't know that other people would value that or needed that or wanted that or anything like that. And it really wasn't about other people for me at all, right? And it was really like, this is Jeannine finally needs to do something for Jeannine. And it just so happened that other people were have had a connection to that. And so I think that that's my answer to that. Like, in addition to everything that else has been said, is just like, being on your, in Philly, they call it your dean, like being on your dean, and being up to what it is that you're here for. And I think other people are, naturally who are similar, like you said, L'Oreal, like you're gonna attract attracts unto like, and Toni Morrison and Beloved talks about, you are my people. And I think that you're exactly right there. And we know our people, we can feel them, we can feel them. And who knows, right? Like if your people is 5 people, sis, that's it. Rock out with your 5, like have a great experience with your 5, like, and don't let it being 5 take you off from having a great experience.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts on that, Tiffany, at all?
I kind of go back to what Issa Rae once said in an interview, just talking about, her rise from doing webisodes to then Insecure on HBO. I always believe in networking across. I think the power in numbers and power in kind of like looking to your left and your right and knowing like what can you bring to the table. So if it be like, oh, you're really great at proofreading, or you're really great at putting websites together, like kind of like collectively putting all of your powers together, like the Power Rangers, and putting yourselves together and making this big like robot-y thing that, things. That's if people remember the Power Rangers. But but I will say there is something about kind of like going to your brother or sister and saying like, hey, can you help me with this thing? Instead of sort of sometimes like maybe like shooting for the moon, for people who may not be able to be available. I will say that I try to be as available as possible, because I remember being a debut writer and I remember how I didn't have anyone to ask questions. I didn't know things. No one was really transparent. I feel like kind of like the level above me were very much like kind of stunted because of the way that they were treated by, the publishing industry, versus now we're a bit more collective, transparent, and everything like that. So I make it a point for any up and coming writer. I may not be able to like sit with you every single day, but I will definitely carve out the time to say like, here are the things like, or I say like, let's have a quick revival offline. And we talk about the things that we need to talk about, like what you need to know, because no one was able to explain that to me. No one wanted to, or, it was somewhat of that crabs in the barrel kind of mentality. So I refuse to kind of carry that legacy with me. So I do make the space to be there. And yeah, like Jeannine said, like, yeah, I have like, a certain amount of friends because, I am still a New Yorker and I don't trust nobody. But I do say that, we're all in this together and I want everybody to win at the end of the day. So I'm hoping that, if anyone has questions and stuff like that, so, to be able to look to, the women on this screen and be able to ask those type of questions of us.
Absolutely. And I can attest to Tiffany making herself available. And I can attest to Jeannine making herself available. Like right before the pandemic, we were going to do a meeting at her bookshop. And she was like down, but it was literally like at the start of the pandemic.
It was like the week of.
Oh my God, like everything shut
Right.
down that week, but she was open. We didn't know each other from a can of paint, but she was open. And L'Oreal just the same, with I admire her freelancing because I kind of dabble in freelancing, but y'all, I don't be trying to pitch like that. It's, it's rough. So, I admire her and she's open. So real quick, because I know we on time, y'all. I feel like the 215 people like, come on, girl. So we're going to get to some of these questions that we have in the queue here. So Gwen asked, is there any advice on how to build an author platform as a nonfiction writer? Because this is something that they know is very important to publishers. Is it continuous pitching and trying to freelance for various publications? Any personal experience or words of wisdom?
All of the above. Because actually this morning I was talking in the call with the publisher. So there is proof that it can happen. You will get the agent and I will get a book deal. But one of the first agents I queried told me, come back when you have 20,000 followers. And I was like, okay. And I think at the time I had maybe 6,000 across all social media platforms. So that is a real thing. And it can be discouraging because if you're like me, you're like, I just want to write. But this is a business. They're in the business of selling books, and building that platform is a real thing. So slow and steady wins the race. If you're out here trying to go viral, you will not go viral. So I have been steady and consistent-ish on Twitter and Instagram. Like, pick a couple to focus on. Don't be out here trying to be on every single platform doing the most with the least. Like, I don't really mess with TikTok. I don't do the YouTube, like everything else like that. I stay in my lane. I started a newsletter that I send out every Wednesday, and that has grown over the years as well. I freelance, I do podcasts. I'm trying to get my name out as much as possible because the platform does matter when you are pitching nonfiction, especially as a debut writer, because like you have me, and then there's, the Rachel Hollises of the world. And, like, sure, she has the platform, but, we'll stop there. I digress, exactly. So it's important, and there are ways to do it authentically that feel true to you. That's the other thing. Like, don't try to sell out or do like something that doesn't feel right. Slow and steady, and where it makes sense, I think is the best advice. It's been about 5 years since the book idea to proposal to pitching and querying. And so you're building along that whole time as well. It's not like you have to come to your agent, to the publisher with the 20,000 followers. I mean, they would love that. And the rejections that I got from some publishers was because of my platform size, but there's an independent publisher that's interested. So don't get discouraged by it. Continue to build as you go, making those partnerships, collaborations with other writers, podcasters, et cetera, to help as well. So I hope that helped to answer.
And booksellers, the people that are going to champion your book to consumers, build those relationships too. Yeah. Awesome. All right. One of the next questions here is, can you speak to, Gloria asked, can you speak to how most authors say they don't make money from it? Just makes me feel like, why try? Is it true? Or what does that statement mean? I am laughing because I'm like, girl, I got a whole job trying to write these books right
now. I guess I'll speak to that. I think it's a double-edged sword. I think you can, when sometimes you're starting, just as starting any career, you get paid in advance, and when you get paid in advance, there's no taxes taken out. They don't take into account, the things that you have to cover your livelihood. So it does, like L'Oreal said, it's a lot about like slow and steady wins the race. Will you come out the gate like making like $1 million? It's very rare when you do that. And to me, I don't feel like that's like what you should sort of aspire for, because I feel like you never want to be a flash in the pan. You never want to be someone who comes out and like, you sell all these books and then you can never sell a book again because you've already peaked. So I believe in having a long tail. I believe in having a long career. I believe in being an author rather than just a writer. So I believe in, and when I say that, I mean, like, do you want to be known as someone who just wrote a book, or do you want to have a career as an author, as a writer, as an influencer, as someone who brought their community to the forefront? So I feel like that's something that a lot of people have done. I mean, you could say a lot of celebrities who literally have had ghostwritten books say that they're an author, but we know better. But I will say that being an author is actually a possible career. It's one of the reasons why I do it now, almost to kind of prove people wrong in a lot of ways, especially my family who didn't want me to be an author when I first wanted to be an author. I come from a West Indian household. Like I was supposed to be a doctor or a nurse, like stop playing. But which is one of the reasons why I do school visits on the side as well too. And school visiting or, working with librarians and doing presentations, that's also another source of income. So just being a writer having a book isn't your only source of income. You can still pitch and write articles. You could still do talks. There's a lot of things that I do on the side to make sure that I'm, still stable in my career. But I do go into schools, specifically a lot of, schools with a lot of kids of color, and I go into prisons and I talk to them because I want them to see that it is truly possible to actually have this career and still eat and not be a starving artist. So I do believe that it is possible, but just knowing like what you're also getting into, like I said to Ashley before, I would totally still have kept my job if I knew what I knew now about paying for your own health insurance in this country.
Listen, and this is also probably, you'll also see it takes a lot of work ethic. I would imagine to have as many books as Tiffany has coming out. Like she's working, you know what I mean? Like she's not waiting for the inspiration, to come knock her on the head to get things done. So that's another part of it too. Awesome. So this next question, because we're gonna close questions, so we're only gonna take what we have left because we want to be respectful of everyone's time. Is this question from Kimberly that says she's excited to return to, or they are, sorry. Oh no, it says she, her. See, look at me with the pronouns. She says she's excited to return to real life events. But do you see these virtual spaces and events still thriving post-pandemic? As this kind of seems to be a good opportunity for community building, do you see that it kind of continuing?
I think yes and no. Like I like being able to kind of like have these events, like, meet you ladies and be able to kind of like go wherever to like still have like book launch events and stuff like that, rather than having to travel and take out like several days out of my week. But I also feel like I miss the energy of real life events. I feel like I exert a lot of energy and don't receive a lot back because I am literally talking to a screen that is sucking the life out of me. So I hope we have events soon. I don't know how many people are going to be there. I don't know how we're going to space it out, but I do believe that, I hope we do. Maybe that's like the best way to say it. Like, I hope we have events again.
Yeah. I know I was so happy when Jeannine's store opened back up, like one of the first like weekends of these sidewalk sales. I was like, I just want to get down there. Like, it's not necessarily close to where I live in the city, but my husband drove me across the city and I was like, I just want to go buy some books. So this last,
that was so sweet of him.
It was,
he's the real MVP.
Nice. Shouts to him for that.
It really was. I think I bought Cast by Isabel Wilkerson and like a couple other books I was looking for, Luster and something else. I was like, we're gonna go get the books. So yeah, shout out to him for driving me clear across the city because we are on the other side. This question says, as someone who's just starting out, simply with only a first draft and not much knowledge about anything in the field, is there any advice you would give on contacting publishers or just getting out there?
Do you know if it's nonfiction or fiction? Because I know the process is a bit different for both. Like fiction, you have to write the whole thing, which.
Well, I feel like part of the thing to know is like, it's not about like going straight to publishers unless you're doing an indie, like unless you might be submitting to an indie press, which like indie presses do sometimes have open submission calls that don't have to be agented. But once if you only have a first draft, you're really just revising and editing that. Like that's like the first step. Like you're actually just trying to make a good book. And so that kind of takes time, and then you're trying to then get it to an agent who would then be the one to kind of talk to the publishers on the fiction side, if that's kind of the question.
Yeah, I would say, the one thing about writing a fiction book is you do have to write the entire book, which is hard for people to really absorb and understand. So a lot of times, people always come to me like, I always wanted to write a book and stuff like that. And then want to have like meetings with me about this idea they have. And I've shut that down. I've basically said, come back to me when you have the book finished and you're on your second or third draft. Because then I'll know that you're actually serious and I can, spend time with you and share my resources. Otherwise, you may be daunted by the idea of writing a 80,000 word book. And that completely takes you off. And usually 9 times out of 10, it does. Out of 9 times out of 10, all the, the random auntie girl from elementary school, somebody is always coming up and saying like, I always wanted to write a book. And I'm like, cool, let me see, when your manuscript is done. And it never fails. I don't see them, I hear from them again. So I think that having that passion, that drive, the patience is really what's going to get you through the door.
And if you are
and a community, a writing community.
That's exactly.
Because like that's who'll read your stuff right now. That's who'll give you feedback. Like if you know what I mean, like and they might even be able to connect you with their audience or their agent or whatever. But you need a community. You need a group if you're still at first draft, I think.
You both were gonna hit on the community piece. Okay. Awesome. Well, I love that. I feel like that's a great place to wrap because that's what we were here to talk about, community. So getting your book with some other people, okay? Because sometimes what looks good in your head does not sound right to other people. Shout out to my group that helped me rework my intro, okay? To see what needed to be done. So I thank you ladies so very much for your time. I really don't take time for granted at all. After 2020, it's like, thank you for spending this hour because time is the most precious thing we have. So I want to make sure to throw to Jared for some final words.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you so much. Y'all dropped so many amazing gems tonight. Ashley, L'Oreal, Jeannine, Tiffany, thank you. Thank you. I do want to do a special shout out to Ashley, who is celebrating her birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
And yes, happy birthday. And thank you all so much for attending tonight's program. Special thanks to our sponsors, The Stables, Lanternfish Press, and Rutgers University Camden Graduate School, Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. Without them, we would not have a program this year. Festival this year. If you like today's event, you can keep up with festival events all year long by signing up for our newsletter at 215festival.org. Following the event, you will be prompted to provide feedback on our audience survey. We would greatly appreciate the chance to hear from you. And finally, at the close of the festival, we hope you will join us for Footnotes, the literary dance party. Come hear tunes selected by some of Philly's hottest author DJs. So with that said, I hope everyone have an awesome evening and good night.